The year is 1961. A Ford Galaxy rolls off the line in Dearborn, Michigan. The hood shuts with a deep, metallic thump. That sound meant something back then. It meant iron. It meant weight. It meant an engine built like the men who designed it expected it to outlast the car itself. Underneath that hood sits an engine that almost nobody is talking about today, but everyone trusted back then. The FE 390. It didn't scream like a high-winding small block. It didn't brag like a Hemi with its aggressive cam lope. It didn't demand attention at every stoplight. It just worked, day after day, mile after mile, year after year. And yet, less than a decade later, Ford quietly pushed it aside. Not because it failed, not because it was weak, not because customers complained, but because the world changed around it. Most people have no idea how close the 390 came to being Ford's perfect V8, or why something nearly flawless still wasn't enough. This is the real story of how Ford's FE 390 was replaced, despite being nearly perfect. Back in the late 1950s, Ford had a problem. Chevrolet was everywhere. On drag strips, Chevys were winning. On racetracks, Chevys were competitive. In driveways across America, Chevys were multiplying. The small block Chevy was cheap to build, light enough to fit anywhere, and winning races that mattered. Ford needed an answer, and they needed it fast. The Y-block engines that Ford had been running were reaching their limits. Good engines, reliable engines, but they couldn't scale up to meet the horsepower demands of the coming decade. So Ford engineers went big, literally. In 1958, Ford introduced the FE engine family. FE officially stood for Ford Edsel, but it might as well have meant flexible engine, because that's exactly what Ford designed. This was a platform meant to scale. Same basic block architecture, same external dimensions, multiple displacements, endless variations. From the start, the FE was meant to be the backbone of Ford performance, and Ford got the fundamentals right. The block was cast with thick walls, thicker than they needed to be. The main bearing caps were beefy. 5 main bearings supported the crankshaft, each one designed with more strength than standard applications required. The deck was tall enough to accommodate long strokes. The bore spacing was wide enough for serious displacement increases down the road. Ford engineers weren't just building an engine, they were building a platform. And by 1961, the sweet spot emerged, 390 cubic inches. With a 4.05-inch bore and a 3.78-inch stroke, the 390 hit a balance most engines only dream about. The bore was big enough to fit decent-sized valves, big enough to let the engine breathe. The stroke was long enough to make torque, but short enough that piston speeds stayed reasonable at highway RPM. The bore-to-stroke ratio was nearly square. That's engineering speak for balanced. Not a screaming short-stroke rever, not a lazy long-stroke tractor motor. Something in between that did everything reasonably well. Thick cylinder walls meant durability. You could bore these blocks, show 60 over, and still have plenty of meat left. Deep skirt block design meant rigidity. Massive main bearings meant longevity. This thing was overbuilt in all the right ways. Compression ratios varied depending on application. Regular passenger cars ran around 9.5.1. Performance versions pushed to 10.0.1 or 10.5.1. These engines wanted premium fuel, but they rewarded it with serious power. In standard 4-barrel form, the 390 made around 300 horsepower. Add a high-lift camshaft, better flowing cylinder heads, and a proper intake manifold, and suddenly you were looking at 330 horsepower, 340, 375. But the real magic wasn't horsepower. The real magic was torque. Over 420 pound-feet in some configurations, at low RPM, before the tachometer needle even started moving seriously. The kind of torque that moved 2-ton cars without effort. The kind that made towing feel like nothing. The kind that made passing on 2-lane highways safe and easy. This engine didn't need to rev. It just pulled. And that's why Ford put it everywhere. Galaxies, Fairlanes, Thunderbirds, F-100 trucks, police interceptors, even luxury Lincolns borrowed FE architecture. The 390 became the default good engine, reliable, strong, predictable. When fleet managers ordered cars, they specified 390s. When taxi companies bought vehicles, they wanted 390s because everyone knew what they were getting. Mechanics loved it. The valve adjustment procedure was straightforward. The timing was easy to set. The carburetor was accessible. Nothing was buried. Nothing required special tools. One Ford technician from the era reportedly said, "You don't rebuild 390s because they break. You rebuild them because the car rusted around them." That wasn't an exaggeration. In the Salt Belt states, body panels dissolved around engines that were still running strong. But Ford wasn't just building engines for families and fleets. They were at war. On the track, the FE family exploded into legend. The 406, the 410, the 427. Side oilers with relocated oil passages for better high RPM lubrication. Tunnel ports with intake passages so large they ran through the cylinder head castings. These were race-bred monsters that powered Galaxies to NASCAR championships and helped Ford beat Ferrari at Le Mans. And the 390 shared their DNA. Same block design, same architecture, same brutal philosophy of overbuilding critical components. The lessons Ford learned racing the 427 filtered down to the 390. Improved casting techniques, better machining processes, refined oiling system designs. The 390 was a race engine's little brother, not quite as powerful, not quite as exotic, but raised in the same family. And yet, cracks were forming, not in the engine, in the world around it. By the mid-1960s, the horsepower wars were out of control. Insurance companies were panicking. They'd noticed that powerful cars crashed more often. Premiums for muscle cars skyrocketed. Some companies refused to cover certain vehicles at any price. Emissions regulations were coming. California led the way. Smog was choking Los Angeles. The federal government was paying attention. The era of unlimited engine development was ending. Fuel quality was changing. Lead was under scrutiny. The additive that allowed high compression ratios was becoming politically toxic. And Ford was facing a problem the FE platform was never designed to solve: weight. An FE 390 with iron heads and iron intake manifold weighed over 650 pounds, fully dressed with accessories closer to 680 pounds. That was fine in a full-size Galaxy, but muscle cars were getting lighter. Handling mattered now. Front-end weight affected braking, cornering, and ride. Chevrolet's small block weighed nearly 150 pounds less. That 150 pounds determined whether a car felt nimble or clumsy, whether it stopped confidently or nervously, whether it cornered flat or pushed wide, and then came cost. The FE block was expensive to cast. Thick iron everywhere, large bearing journals, heavy-duty internals, all of it cost money. Ford accountants noticed. They compared the cost per engine across the lineup. They calculated profit margins. The numbers didn't favor the FE. And then there was emissions. High compression was dying. By 1968, compression ratios were dropping fast. The 10.51 ratios that made the 390 exciting were disappearing. The 390 could survive low compression, but it was optimized for an era that was ending. Retarded timing reduced power. Leaner mixtures reduced power. Smog pumps parasitically drained power. All of it dulled the engine's character. The 390 that made 300 horsepower in 1966 made 265 horsepower in 1970. Same displacement, same basic engine, but strangled by emissions equipment. Still, it didn't fail. It adapted, but something else was coming. In 1968, Ford quietly introduced its replacement philosophy, the 385 series, better known by one name, the 460. This was a completely different engine, different block, different heads, different approach. Instead of one flexible platform that did everything, Ford split duties. Small blocks for light cars, big blocks for heavy applications, specialization instead of universality. The FE was stuck in the middle. Too heavy to be efficient in small cars, too small to be king in heavy-duty applications. The 460 used a 4.36-inch bore and a 3.85-inch stroke, massive displacement, massive torque potential, and it was designed from day one to meet emissions requirements. Lower compression ratios were baked into the design, and crucially, It was cheaper to produce. At the same time, the Windsor small block family was evolving fast. The 351-1W emerged as a genuine alternative to the 390 in many applications. Similar horsepower to a detuned 390, far less weight, lower manufacturing cost, better weight distribution in smaller cars. In a Mustang, the 351W just made more sense. The car handled better, it stopped better, it felt more balanced. So Ford made a decision. Not dramatic, not public, not announced in press releases. They just stopped choosing the 390. When product planners specified engines for new models, they picked other options. When engineers allocated development resources, they focused elsewhere. Production tapered. Performance versions disappeared. By the early 1970s, the FE was effectively dead in passenger cars. The tooling was retired. Blocks were scrapped. An entire era ended quietly. No scandal, no failure, just replacement. Which is almost worse, because the 390 didn't deserve to die. It was nearly perfect for its time. Ask anyone who's built one. The oiling system was simple and effective. Bearings lived long lives. Crankshafts rarely failed. With proper tuning, these engines ran 200,000 miles without drama. The bottom end could handle abuse. The block tolerated overbores. The heads flowed well enough to make serious power with modern cam profiles. Today, a properly built 390 can make over 450 horsepower on pump gas while idling smoothly and running cool. It will cruise all day at highway speeds without stress. Try that with many modern engines. It's harder than you think. Collectors know this now. Prices are climbing. Clean, original 390s command premiums at auctions. FE parts are being reproduced. Intake manifolds that haven't been manufactured in decades are available new. Builders chase factory castings like C6AE and C8AE blocks. A real GT390 from a Mustang is worth serious money now, because people finally realized what they lost. The 390 wasn't flashy like the 427. It didn't have the racing pedigree, the Le Mans victories. It wasn't legendary like the Hemi. It didn't have the mystique, the fear factor. It wasn't lightweight like a small block. It couldn't compete on power to weight in smaller chassis. But it was honest. It delivered exactly what it promised every single time. You wanted torque? It made torque. You wanted reliability? It ran forever. You wanted durability? It survived abuse. You wanted simplicity? Everything was accessible. No surprises, no temperament, no drama. Ford didn't replace it because it was bad. They replaced it because the industry moved on. Regulations demanded engines designed for emissions compliance from the start. Cost demanded simpler manufacturing. Marketing demanded specialized products. Weight demanded lighter alternatives. The FE390 belonged to a moment when engines were built to last first and comply later. When engineers prioritized durability over cost savings, when designers assumed owners would keep cars for decades, that moment ended. And when it did, one of Ford's best balanced engines ever quietly slipped into history. Not with a bang, not with controversy, just silence. So the next time you hear someone say the 390 was just another big block, remember this. Remember that it powered more different applications than almost any Ford engine of its era. Remember that it shared DNA with Le Mans winning race engines. Remember that it earned the trust of mechanics, fleet managers, and police departments. Remember that survivors are still running strong 60 years later. It was nearly perfect. And sometimes, nearly perfect still isn't enough. The world doesn't always reward excellence. Sometimes it rewards timing. Sometimes it rewards cost savings. Sometimes it rewards being new instead of being good. The 390 was good, arguably great, but it was born in an era that was ending, and when that era ended, the 390 ended with it. Not because it failed, because the rules changed. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Ford's most underappreciated engines, let me know in the comments which forgotten engine or rivalry you want to hear next. And make sure to subscribe, because these stories are hiding under old hoods everywhere, waiting to be told. The FE390 waited 60 years. Now you know the truth.